Okay. Hopefully you all can see my screen now. Oh, good. Jennifer nodded yes. Excellent. My name is Becky Anderson, and I work at Macmillan. So thank you very much for joining us today. We have had a tremendous amount of interest in this webinar. So today we're going to talk about, well, I say we, I'm not really doing anything. Jennifer Duncan is here with us today from a school that has as many names as possible, Georgia State University Perimeter College. And she's going to talk with us about scaffolding assignments to build success. We are using GoToWebinar as our technology. And what that means is everyone is muted except Jennifer and myself. However, we do want people to ask questions. So over on the far right, you should see the question panel. If you click on questions, you can ask questions to us. You have to type them in. We will certainly answer them. One question that I know comes up all the time, so I will just address now, although I'll probably answer it also in the question panel, is we are recording this, and we will send out the recording to everyone who registered for this event probably a couple days from now. Macmillan is actually closed tomorrow in honor of Cesar Chavez Day, so it'll probably be next week, but we will send the recording and the slides out to everyone. If you somehow get lost in GoToWebinar, there should be that little sort of flower icon on the bottom, and that will help you find your place. So let me stop here, and I'm going to make Jennifer the presenter. And you should have the power, and we see, there you go. Oh. There we go. Perfect.
There we go. Okay. Thanks, everybody, and thank you for taking time out of your day today to talk to me a little bit about scaffolding assignments. This is something that I hope you will find useful for you. As you just heard, I teach at Georgia State University's Perimeter College, which is the 2-year degree granting part of our institution. And I happen to teach English fully online, but I think that some of these strategies will help no matter what course you're teaching. So I wanted to talk to you today about scaffolding assignments and what exactly that is and why you might want to consider doing it. So one of the reasons that I think we need to talk about scaffolding assignments are we all face similar challenges. So our challenges are our students come to us and they're not academically prepared. This was the case pre-COVID. Of course, we know that it's just gotten more interesting as we see students coming to us with very different academic abilities based on where they were in high school or what type of learning they did, even in their preliminary classes. We also know that students don't understand the concept of revision. So asking them to redo an assignment over and over isn't what we're talking about when we're talking about scaffolding. And we know that students don't really know how to collaborate effectively. They don't know how to give each other feedback, and they don't know how to receive feedback from each other and then use it constructively. From a faculty point of view, we also know that we're all teaching overloaded classes. We want to give our students feedback. We want to give them timely feedback and actionable feedback, but we don't have time to do that when, for example, I teach a 4-5 teaching load with 100+ students in a writing class. The last reason that I really think scaffolding helps is because of emergencies. And I put this in quotation marks intentionally because I am no longer taking it upon myself as a faculty member to decide what are real emergencies and what aren't real emergencies. What I think we've all learned over the past couple of semesters is things happen for which we cannot account. And whether it is a school-wide shutdown due to COVID or whether it is a parent who can't come to class or can't turn in work because their children's school has shut down, or whether it is an illness for which they were not prepared. We can't predict these things. We just have to have a strategy in place for handling them. And when we scaffold assignments, we can make them so that a student isn't shut down immediately by not being able to do a step of the process or perhaps by not being able to turn in a finished product. So what is scaffolding? It's basically breaking an assignment into small, low-stakes steps. So kind of think of it, the reason we call it scaffolding, obviously, is because it's like we're building something. We're going to build a larger project, but we're going to do it in small steps where the students will have feedback, but they'll also have reflection. There's a real emphasis in this, in having students reflect on their own work, having them think about their writing process, having them think about themselves as a student and as a learner, and where they are in their own plan for success, not just their plan for success on this particular assignment, but their plan for success in the course and hopefully in their future academic successes. Like we said, this also has to do with actionable feedback. If I wait and give my students in my writing class feedback on an essay, it's too late for them to do anything with that essay. That feedback is no longer actionable, as I like to say. So this is finding in time ways to find out where they are, what they're missing, what they don't know, and give them feedback at a point where they can still make changes to the project. This goes very well with the idea of full transparency in assignment creation and grading, no longer assuming that our students can make the cognitive jumps from the assignment to the finished product, but leading them a bit at a time. And like I said, when we were talking about emergencies, this allows us to grade on a process, not just on a product. So as a writing teacher, we're always fond of saying that writing is a process, and then we ask them to give us an essay. But instead, that we actually grade is the product, the final paper. And the product does count. But when we scaffold, we're able to give them points all the way through the process and grade them on their individual growth. And that helps us to promote equity in our grading as well. And like I said, this is not just more revision. This is not asking them to rewrite assignments, because we know that they cannot and do not rewrite assignments effectively. So how does scaffolding help instructors? It's going to encourage conversations with students. And that, I would say, is one of my #1 goals, especially when I'm teaching online. Students don't like to ask questions. No matter how many times I send out emails or create what I feel are open invitations to collaboration on a discussion board, they don't initiate that conversation and they don't respond to my attempts to offer them generalized help. But when I set up these checkpoints, it offers us chances to talk about their work, talk about what they just did and what they can do now. Like I also said, it increases the completion of the assignment, but it increases the number of students who are able to complete my course. For example, I want to give you a really timely example that happened to me last semester. One of my students experienced a mental health issue that required her to be hospitalized. And when she sent me an email after she was released, she had missed a full week of class and she had missed the final turn-in of a big assignment. Now, that student had documentation. She had a real emergency. Again, I'm not assessing her mental health. What I am assessing is how can I help her proceed in my class. It would have sunk her, not only in my class, but it would have sunk her progress towards her own self-development and her own mental health if I had said, well, you've got to go back and you've got to redo this project. You missed this. You can either take a 0 or you can turn it in late. I didn't have to make that choice. I could say, you could take a 0, you could turn it in late, or we have a third option. Because we've scaffolded this assignment, I can grade you on the 79% of the work that you were able to get done. And I can assess how you grew throughout that project and how your final version that you were able to submit compared to the first steps. And you can get a grade on the project that may not be an A, but it's not a, hey, find time to redo this again. And it's also not a 0. So in doing that, not only did I help her to be able to mark that assignment as done, but I helped to retain her in the class because she didn't have to even consider a medical withdrawal. There was another ramp for her. It also provides us insight into students' progress and comprehension. When I'm looking at different steps of a process, or as I'm going to talk to you about, when I allow students to look at each other's work in process, it gives us a chance to ask questions and to see ahead of time if something isn't clear, and to stop and retarget that particular area of the assignment or that particular area of the content. And I would argue that because I am scaffolding my assignment, I'm breaking up the grading process, and it actually decreases the time it takes for me to grade a final project. So how does it work? Basically, we're going to reverse engineer our assignments. We're going to ask ourselves, what do I want my students to accomplish? What is the finished product? So maybe for me in a writing class, the finished product is an MLA documented argumentative research paper. Then I have to ask, what are the steps they need to take in order to get there? So I ask this so that I can write those steps out before they create the assignment, before I create the assignment. So I want my students to accomplish an MLA documented research paper. Well, my students don't know how to integrate sources. But wait, before that, my students don't know how to find sources. Well, wait, before that, my students don't know what kind of questions to ask. So I start unpacking the assignment and not assuming that my students knew all the steps, but instead thinking, what are all the steps they would have to go to get where I want them to be? And there are a couple of ways you can do a scaffolded assignment. So one of the ways would be to take a larger assignment and to break it into several mini assignments that would then get assembled in the end. So for example, if you're teaching an art appreciation class, you might just ask students to describe a painting, and that would be one assignment. Then you would say, okay, now that same painting, show me how it exemplifies two characteristics of its era. Now that you've described it, tell me how it fits into this era. Then tell me how it demonstrates specific artistic techniques. Again, these would each be a different assignment. And then as you see, by the time you got to step 5, maybe you'd have them write an essay that exemplifies, that shows how this painting exemplifies an artist and his or her role in artistic movement. But you'd say, wait, you don't have to actually write that essay. You've actually got all 4 steps that lead up to that essay or that lead up to the multimedia project or whatever it is. But you've had these touch points where throughout it, you've been able to integrate your lessons into developing that particular step of the assignment. The other way you can scaffold assignment is have students to have multiple encounters with the same type of material, but increase the difficulty with each of those encounters. So for example, you might have students read an article that's on a contemporary topic. They read it, they summarize it. Now you give them another article on the same topic, but this one is a bit more complex in its language or in its construction. And then you give them another one, and maybe this one synthesizes multiple viewpoints, but you're building their skills while talking about the same topic each time, so they're encountering it multiple ways. Like I said, I teach writing a lot, and so one of the things that I like to do is this third example. I like to create scaffolding within a single assignment. So I design an assignment so that there are multiple stages, and each stage has some type of feedback and some type of reflection. And again, the emphasis here is on self-reflection, and the emphasis is on creating moments of conversation between the students and between me and between the students and each other, and honestly, between the students and their own learning process. So it's not that I'm going to grade everything as I'm going to show you, but it's going to create multiple steps so that they build a little at a time and they think of the questions they need to ask. So let me show you what this looks like. This is an example of an old writing prompt that is very common if you've taught writing in any institution anywhere. You've probably had a writing prompt like this one. Choose one of the assigned images and write an essay which analyzes the rhetorical situation, the rhetorical strategies, and the rhetorical appeal in order to evaluate the image's effectiveness. Now, it would be really tempting for me as a writing instructor to go, that clearly says what it is. In fact, they gave them 3 parts. They should very easily be able to do that. But what I know from experience is that my students couldn't, because they couldn't make the jump from looking at an image to writing about the image. So instead, I unpacked the assignment. And the first thing you see when you have a scaffolded assignment prompt is it's going to be very detailed, and it's going to take up a lot of space, okay, because you're going to write out all the steps. And let me go ahead and say, some people might ask, are you spoon feeding your students when you do this? Yeah, I kind of am, because what I've learned is that's the only way that I can get them to eat. It's the only way I can get them to accomplish the task. So you're going to start with the background. How does this fit into what we've done in the past? How does this fit in with what we've said are the goals of our course? How does this fit in with what we're learning? And then you lay out the guidelines, and you lay them out as simplistically as possible. Start by reading this essay. Then select an image from the array of images that I've given you. Shouldn't they know that? Well, of course they should know that, but I can guarantee you every time I do this assignment, someone says, where do I find the visual analysis image options? So don't expect them to remember that that was a different page. Put it right there, and then lay out every step of the process that you want them to do. So this is what the initial prompt would look like, but let me show you what it looks like in action. Now, when I'm doing a writing assignment, I'm doing it in Macmillan's Achieve Writing tool. So the screenshots that I'm going to show you come from that. If you use that tool, you'll recognize it. But if not, you'll know how to use this in some other way, or whatever tool you choose to use. I hope that you choose to scaffold your assignments. So this would be the first step I would have students do for me. As you can see from the setup here, this is something that I'll review. You'll see that it says instructor review. So it means that I'm going to look at this for the student, and then the student will have to write a revision plan based on what I tell them. Remember that we said the impetus here is always on students reflecting and revising and moving forward. Then we use what I like to call draft goals, and what a chief calls draft goals. I shouldn't take credit for that. But it's very important when you're scaffolding your assignment that you tell the students exactly what they're supposed to do in each step and exactly what they can expect from you in each step. So for this assignment, their instructions here are: after analyzing your image using the materials given to you in the iCollege content module, that's what we call our LMS, it's D2L, develop a thesis statement which evaluates the effectiveness. Remember to address the how and the why, and then again, point them back to the materials that they needed to read to get ready for this. And this one's really important. I will only be providing feedback on your thesis statement. So tell your students very explicitly what you want from them and what they can expect from you. So that's why I have one draft goal. All I'm going to look at is a thesis statement. When a student responds to this by giving me an entire paragraph or an entire essay, I will respond back with, I'm only looking at the thesis statement, because we're only looking at our first step here. The writer reflection questions are of the utmost importance, and I'm going to show you why. So I know the criteria that's being used for giving me feedback. If they answer no to that, then I know I need to address that more than I need to address the assignment right now. And then I give them a couple of free response questions. And I want to show you what their responses look like. So when a student did this, I need to point out that because I'm using this assignment tool, it's called draft. Again, this wasn't a full draft of an essay. This was just a sentence I asked them for. So it's really a step. The student says that she strongly agrees. She knows what I'm looking for. I want you to know that this is my opinion of the image. The primary argument I'm making is my personal analysis of the image. So without even looking at what the student submitted for a thesis statement, I know based on the student reflection that the student and I need to have a conversation, because right now the student thinks she's writing an opinion paper instead of an analysis paper. I can address that right now. I've created a checkpoint that I would not have had if I just asked her to write a first draft of an essay. Or if she had done that and I told her she was all wrong, then again, I'm defeating the student's morale. So this step allowed that. It also helps because when I have a student like this, I know the criteria that will be used for giving me feedback. Strongly disagree. I want you to know nothing. The primary argument I'm making is, can you grow mold? This student is angry. This student is not in a headspace to accept feedback. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to give the student feedback, but it means I'm going to alter how I talk to the student. It means I'm going to alter the way I address him or her. And when I get one like this that says I'm open to changing my thesis, I might also change it on my own if I'm allowed. Well, that's like writing nirvana, right? Because now I've got a student who is telling me, I understand that this is just a step in the process. This is just where I'm going. So I wanted to show you these because I told you earlier that actually breaking things up doesn't make it harder to grade. It makes things go more quickly. I want you to see that in 2 minutes, we were just able to evaluate the progress of 3 different students and know that we need to address that with a conversation or a conference or written comments, however you like to have comments. But we know what feedback we need to give without even looking at the product. This is what step 2 of that same assignment would look like. Notice on step 2, this one's going to be peer reviewed. So if I've already looked at their thesis statement and I've already given feedback on it, they had to then revise that thesis statement and present a new one. And for this one, they're going to present it to their classmates along with topic sentences and paragraphs. So again, we've moved to the 3rd actual step of this process. The first one was submitting the first step, the thesis statement. The second was using the feedback in our conversations to revise that thesis statement. And now we're on step 3, but you'll notice that I'm not part of step 3. The students are going to talk to each other. The students are going to have their thesis statement evaluated again, but more importantly, they're going to have conversations with classmates about what is and is not working. And after they do that, they're going to get more feedback, and then they're going to move to step 3. And I wanted to show you this one because I want you to really understand when I say a step doesn't have to be a draft and a step doesn't even necessarily get graded. In this one, again, same process, same big project, another step in the process. I'm asking students to give 2 intro paragraphs, and your classmates are just going to vote on which one of those 2 they like better. They will give a strongly agree, great job, excellent work, thumbs up, green, it'll appear green for the one they like the best, and a needs improvement for the one they don't like. This is something that students can do for each other in 10 minutes. This is something that they can do because they're used to rating things on Netflix or Spotify with thumbs up and thumbs down. They don't have to give detailed feedback because that's included in the draft goals. It's pre-written in the draft goals that I'm using. But they're able to very quickly give each other feedback on work in progress. And then students can use that feedback to revise their project. They can also use that feedback to talk to me. Again, maybe they disagree with what the students have said, but so far they've turned in multiple steps of this process. I've graded one and the others have been done between each other. So they've been able to give each other feedback and come to me with conversations that they have or questions that they have about that feedback. And then this is where we'd end up at the final paper. You'll notice for draft goals, I'm not looking at an intro. I'm not looking at thesis statements. Those things have been evaluated 4 times already, and they've had 4 opportunities to talk to me about those. So for this one, I'm going to look at more in-depth draft goals. And I'm going to, again, ask them to reflect on what they did, to reflect on what they've written. They had a chance to reflect on their peer reviews. They had a chance to reflect on what they learned from working with each other. But they've had a chance now to take all of those steps and put them all together. And they were able to do this in chunks, and they were able to get feedback and multiple reflection the whole time. I wanted to show you this screen too, because this is, maybe I should be more embarrassed by this, but it's just the reality of how teaching goes sometimes. I can look here and I can see when I've returned feedback to students, and I can see whether or not they've viewed it. So again, when I'm checking to see students, I can see who's actually taking my feedback and applying it, and who is not making that transition from one final assignment to the start of the next assignment, who's not building that bridge, because that helps me know that I can go back and help them build that bridge. I would take, if this were me, at the end of the assignment, I would implement a checkpoint survey. And again, this is an example of the checkpoint surveys that I use that are built into the version of Achieve that I use, that ask students to self-reflect. So what the student answers to this is interesting to me as an instructor. I can see who's off track based on what their goals were. I can see what challenges they had. I can see how much time they're spending. But more important, the student's able to self-reflect. So this is one of those metacognitive activities where students are able to think about their own learning process as they culminate an activity. They're able to stop and go, okay, as I went through this, how did it fit into my learning goals? Where did I fall short? Where did I succeed? Where did I do better this time than the last one in the types of changes I needed to make to my process or my schedule or whatever outside things are going on? So a real emphasis here on closing that reflective loop from where students started in that assignment to thinking about how this assignment fits into their overall goals for the course. And there's some important things to think about as you consider scaffolding your assignments. This should go without saying, but maybe it doesn't. Sequence your assignments from the simplest to the complex. You saw, for example, asking students to write a thesis statement. This was not in a developmental course. The example I gave was actually from a Composition 2 course. So writing a thesis statement should be something that students are comfortable with, but I want them to take the time to even evaluate what should be the most simple part of their essay and to think about that. Make sure that you're clearly building bridges that connect one assignment to the next assignment, and clearly laying out why your assignments are structured as they are structured so that they understand the process. This helps them to understand that they're not doing busy work, that they're doing building work, which is very different. And again, as I've stated, each draft does not have to be graded. They don't even have to be read. I showed you how I did it on an assignment and how I utilized other classmates to read each other's work. But even if you had students do that work in their own journal or do that work and submit it and never opened the assignment, never looked at it, there would still be value to that, because students need to learn to work in steps. They need to learn to work in stages. And really explicitly tell your student what they're going to gain from each step and what to expect in terms of the feedback. So, like I said, with those draft goals, it's important for them to know why you're targeting this particular draft goal at this particular stage of the process, and being really clear and really transparent, because what you want to have is for them to never consider any one step the end of their project, but to consider each step an invitation to a conversation with you so that you can work together to build this overall project. So I'm happy to take any questions you have. I'm happy to steal any ideas you may have about what things would work or wouldn't work in a class like this, if you or sequencing assignments in the class that you have.
We definitely have some questions here for you.
Awesome.
Okay. So given this example or what you do in class, how long does it typically take you or in your sort of assignment process to do a full essay for the students? Like, is that a week?
How long do students have while they're working on an essay?
Yeah, basically.
Okay. So in my composition 2 class, from the day the assignment is given to the day the last draft of an essay would be turned in would be about 4 weeks. We're working on a 14-week semester. So they would have about 4 weeks for the essay that I showed you, an example essay. From the start to the finish, they would have about 4 weeks to do the entire process.
Okay.
If, of course, you're working in a 7-week class, you would move that much shorter. So, for example, looking at 2 versions of an intro statement in an online class, that might be something I give them 3 or 4 days to do. In a face-to-face class, that would be something we would do in 10 minutes. So that would alter based on your class format and based on the overall time you have for a semester.
Okay. Do students like that thumbs up, thumbs down for the, comparison piece?
They do because students feel very uncomfortable giving each other feedback, right? So when they look at each other's work, they want to point out comma splices or grammar things because they feel like they maybe know grammar, so maybe they can do that. They don't like to evaluate. But if you ask them to evaluate something holistically, and the way it's set up in the writing tools with the Achieve writing assignments, or they rate, it's a 3-level ranking system. It's great job, needs improvement, needs extensive revision. They do feel like they can mark something, one of those 3 things. And then for the student who's getting the feedback, they automatically, based on how I've written that draft goal, they automatically get taken to a relevant section of the ebook that would give them the supports. So it's not up to their classmates necessarily to explain what you do to fix this thesis statement or what you do to fix this topic sentence. They're just saying, it really just doesn't work. And maybe I can't explain why, but it doesn't work. So will you look at it? And again, as an instructor, if the student then comes to me and says, my classmates are saying this doesn't work, I'm not sure why, that's still a win for me because now I have a conversation with the student about that step of the project.
Makes sense. All right, this is like a multi-part question. Let me start with one piece. So do you explain the whole assignment at the beginning of the semester or in your syllabus, like that you're doing this approach, or do you release just the pieces as they come?
So I would give them the entire assignment at the start of the assignment. It would look like that initial writing prompt. Let me see. Look away if you get motion sick. It would look like this giant prompt, and then they would see each step on the time that was due. So here's the entire prompt. Now, step 1 is due on this day, and here are the directions specifically for step 1. Step 2 is due on this day, and here are the steps. So after they did step 1, they'd get the step 2 directions.
Okay.
So they'd see the overall assignment, but I don't assume that they will take that over assignment and break it down into the steps by themselves. I give them the steps for each stage of the process as we get to that.
Do you explain this whole approach like in the syllabus or at the beginning of class?
I do, in a very overview sort of way. I say we're going to be doing this project as a multi-step project. You are required to complete every step, and every step will get a grade. Again, some of those grades are check, yes, they did it, or no, they didn't do it, and numerically they don't count for anything. But I do say we will be doing this in steps along the way in order to increase your success and in order to encourage you to ask questions. So I do believe in telling them this is what they're going to do, and this is what the expectation is.
All right, so we have some questions about the grading because one of the slides said the draft doesn't need to be graded, but then you had the example where the student got 79%. So how do you actually? Can you explain a little bit more about the grading and how you think about that?
I can tell you how I do it. So when I set up, okay, something weird just happened. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, that was despite me turning my phone off, it still rang.
That's fine. So when my students, when I set up my syllabus, Our requirement in our department is that they write 3 essays plus an annotated bibliography, and that is required to be a certain portion of their grade. In my class, that is 60% of their class grade comes from those assignments. Everything else can come from whatever I want to. So when I say the steps don't get graded, some of those aren't like in the homework category, check you did your homework, or X you didn't do your homework. You submitted it or you didn't. So they're not graded on the quality of the work, they're graded on whether or not you did part of the process. A larger step, for example, on a research paper and annotated bibliography may be a step that would be more likely to get out of if that whole research paper was worth 20% of the class grade, 5% of that might be the annotated bibliography. So depending on the depth of the step, but for example, the one I just showed you, they would have gotten homework grades for doing the first step. They would have gotten homework grades for doing the second step. They would have gotten a homework grade for a peer review. They would have gotten a homework grade for their next submission. They would have gotten a homework grade. So there would have been like 6 or 7 homework grades. And then when I said, for example, a student had an emergency and couldn't complete the final project, what I was able to do is then I was able to go in, see the student's thesis statement, see the student's body paragraphs, see the student's introduction, and grade those as if they were part of an essay. If she had not done those steps, I wouldn't have been able to do that to help her. But basically, I was able to say, from the steps you have submitted, let's assemble those steps together and call it not your best work, but your best work in this particular situation, and give you a grade on that, rather than saying, now you have to write an essay. Sorry, you still have to write an essay. So all the stages become quiz grades, homework grades, that sort of thing.
Okay, that makes sense. This is something for the follow-up, but could you send some full examples of some of those scaffolded assignments you use? And some of it, I mean, we have the slides. We'll share out the recording as well as the slides with everybody. And I don't know if you have another sample that you want to share or not, or if that would be sufficient.
I can share another sample, yes, of what I would design. I obviously can't share my student work, right. But I can share another. Yeah, can I just get that to you, Becky, maybe, yeah. And you can whoever that person is, or you can share my email with that person, and we can talk about it. Yeah.
Yep, that sounds good. Okay, let's see. I think you answered this. Well, maybe not. Do you assign one big scaffolded project or multiples?
So we have 3, like I said, in our requirement is 3 formal essays. I scaffold every one of those 3 formal essays.
Let's see.
Again, I'm teaching writing. If you're teaching something else, you decide how that works in your class.
At the end of the term, do students write a full essay, sort of, soup to nuts, with the like such a research paper with the intro, body, paragraphs, conclusion, works cited, and all that stuff?
Yes, that is their final assignment in my class, but that is also a scaffolded assignment. So the final version that they turn in looks like a good old-fashioned MLA documented research paper, but to get to that point, I've looked at different steps along the way.
Okay. I don't really know what this question means. Is there a particular platform within Achieve that you use?
I use the writing assignments tool.
Yeah, so I will just, so Achieve is basically a, oh good, that answered it. Okay, perfect. But Achieve is a courseware tool. We have it available with a number of our textbooks, and then within that there's content that we provide tied to the textbooks, as well as tools such as the writing tools that Jennifer has showed that allow students to do peer review and drafting and all sorts of, we have plagiarism checker, or plagiarisy, if that's a new word for you. So all sorts of pieces there.
Okay. And it does work more effectively than when I tried to do this in my old LMS, because you can't really tie assignments together where you can look at side-by-side things. So there may be a way to do it in whatever LMS you happen to be using. It disconnected the steps for me in a way that made it harder for students to understand this was all one continual project.
All right. I think this has been fantastic. I'll give people like another minute or two if anybody else has any additional questions. We do have a couple people who, oh, I love this. I'm just going to read this out loud, whose name I'm not going to say out loud. I would appreciate if I can get Jennifer's email to discuss with her this topic with the types of assignments I'm doing, as I plan to move to scaffolding because I spend too much time on grading.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. Becky, you can share out my email. It is jduncan@gsu.edu. But yeah, I will say I had a colleague the other day who we may or may not have been sitting in a department meeting, and we may or may not have been grading papers while doing that, because I'm sure none of you have ever done that. And she made the comment that she couldn't manage to make it through grading an essay without it taking an hour. And I said, oh my goodness, you and I have got to talk about draft goals, because you've got to speed this process up. So actually being able to sit down and grade a draft goal in a scaffolded assignment, it takes so much less time, and it feels so much more fair to the student at the end, because now I haven't bogged myself down and reading 100 essays and I'm grumpy before I got to his paper. Instead, I'm looking at his with fresh eyes, because I'm just looking at steps. And so now maybe I can grade in whole classes step in an hour versus hours and hours to grade a whole paper, give it back, hope they revise it, and know that they're really not going to revise.
This question is really for me. Can this writing tool be utilized for short answer questions in biology topics? Right now, the writing tools component is only available for English courses, but we are exploring ways to sort of maybe do a scaled down version. The English folks use many more aspects of this that probably are not going to be needed in some of the other discipline areas. So we are exploring ways that we could have this available for biology, history, psychology. We definitely have some interest in that. So not yet, but coming. All right, and we have another person, just a compliment, and then we'll probably let you go, which is this topic is very timely, not just for grading purposes, but also for teaching students effectively and communicating with them through the process, which I totally agree. Do you have, is there any research or any books that you have read on this topic that you would recommend?
There are a couple of helpful websites that if you search for, you can see how this has been implemented. Many universities have it as like an initiative. It's not one that ours particularly has. But if you look for it, you'll be able to find some websites, and I can provide those to Becky perhaps as well, if she wants to shoot out a follow-up email or attach it to it. I could create a slide and attach it before you send out the slides. But some examples of how other institutions have implemented it on a more formal level. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And another just fantastic compliment. I really am going to hang up soon. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I've been scaffolding my writing courses for a while and didn't know it had a name. I've often wondered if it was worth it for students. I feel so validated by your discussion. So.
I definitely feel like it's worth it to students. Definitely. And worth it to us as teachers, because the final project is a better project.
Yeah, which is really what your end goal is, right? It's not to torture yourself in the grading process, but to actually have students leave the course as better, more competent, more confident writers.
That's what we all want, right? More competent and confident students. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Lots of more compliments coming in. I'm going to stop reading them out loud. Thank you very much, Jennifer, and everyone. We will send you probably an email next week with some additional information. I'll have the slides, the recordings, and then some details. There will be a certificate of attendance in there, and possibly we'll add some information about some other assignment types, as well as some additional research materials. So, all right. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.